Hyssop tells a dog with a bone. A dog with a bone was crossing a bridge over a stream. And he looks at this reflection in the stream and he decides that the second dog there had a bigger bone. He goes for the bone. But as he goes for the bone, he loses this very bone that was in his mouth down bottom into the stream. Now he has no bone. The tenants today, my dear brothers and sisters, in the parable are similar. Because of greed, they lost the important part and therefore they become nothing. They become absolutely nothing with themselves. Well, shall we call this parable infidel tenants? Or shall we call them as greedy tenants? Or shall we call them as avaricious tenants? I think all suits them. If you remember last Sunday's parable and today's parable and the next Sunday's parable, all these three parables are known as melancholy parables. They are called as melancholy parables because Jesus is heading towards Jerusalem. In other words, very few hours left for his death. And therefore, all these sad parables are a kind of warning to the high priest, the people around, and those who were mocking at him and those who were looking at his end. And that is the reason why these three melancholy parables are very, very important for each and every one of us. Today's parable is about the vineyard. The vineyard refers to the people of Israel in the Old Testament. And therefore, we find that the owner of the vineyard is God. And if God is the owner, the farmers are the rulers. And if farmers are rulers, the priests who are there are the ones who run the country. The servants or the slaves that we hear in today's gospel reading are the prophets down the centuries, as we see in the Old Testament. The murderers are the ones who make up an obituary column perpetually in the scriptures. Looking at this aspect, my dear brothers and sisters, we shall go to the first reading because the first reading and the gospel reading are connected in a way. Why? Because here the vineyard is Israel, and God, as we hear in today's first reading, he says that my beloved had a vineyard, and on this fertile hill I have given them this vineyard, and in the vineyard they had to faithfully grow. They did it. But what happened in return was they yielded bitter grapes. Normal, they should get sweet grapes for the wine. But now, outcome is bitter. In other words, we see very clearly that the collective sins and the individual sins of Israel is counted, and therefore the bitter grapes or the wild grapes that comes out of the yield is to show that there is sin existing in Israel. And they had been not faithful to the beloved who gave them this vineyard to grow sweet grapes. Now, when this happens, Yahweh says, I will remove your fences. I'll devour your entire vineyard. I will destroy. In other words, he says, I will cause ruin to you. And that looks really terrible. But look at Yahweh. Yahweh, he allows Israel only to feel the consequence of sin. This is important for each and every one of us. Every time when we fall into sin, as human as we are, we fall into sin. God, in a way, makes you only feel the consequence of sin. Don't just imagine that he's going to destroy you, he's going to ruin you, he's going to totally remove you out of the church. No. He is here to only make you feel the consequences. so that you are aware. That is why in today's parable we see in the gospel that he says, what will I do? What will the owner of the vineyard do? Definitely we see the owner of the vineyard will put those tenants to death and give the vineyard to the ones who can give the produce in due season. Why does he do this? Warn them is because to get them to feel the consequence of sin. Therefore, in our lives also, my dear brothers and sisters, that you and I should know that we may also be facing terrible consequences because the wrath of God will be upon us. But remember, the merciful God, a loving God, who only makes you feel the consequence of sin. In other words, you and I should become a better son. That is what we go back to the first parable, that is last Sunday's parable. We had the parable, the two sons. And in the two sons, they were two bad sons in a way, two worst sons. But among the two worst, there was the better one. So, the better one is what Jesus wants. In other words, when he gives you the vineyard, he wants you to be the better person. When he is going to make you feel the consequence of sin, he wants you to become a better person. Don't think that he is going to destroy you. No, he is not going to do that. He is only going to bring you to that feeling of what you are going to face. But he is there to save you ultimately. That is the beauty of it. Now, if you look at this part in the Catholic Church, the vineyard is the Catholic Church today. You and I are the vineyard, because the church is not priest, it is every one of us, the priest, the bishop, the laity, every one of us. Therefore, the new Jerusalem is the vineyard, the church today. That is the reason why you and I have to be the ones who can bring the fruits for Jesus Christ in the due season. And therefore, if you and I, who are faithful followers of Jesus Christ, do not bring that fruits the due season, then he will show you and bring that feeling of the consequences of that sin. And that is the reason why we see now, is he going to remove us from this vineyard and throw us out and give it to somebody else? He is not going to do that. Why? Because he has already done that, and you and I are privileged ones to receive the vineyard of the Lord from the unfaithful. The unfaithful are gone. You and I have been privileged to be given the vineyard. And therefore, look at that part where you and I are privileged to be in the church. You and I are able to receive sacraments. You and I are able to receive this great gift of God. And we are able to exercise our faith and receive the graces and blessings. Therefore, the last part that would always come to our mind, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, is for each one of us to realize that you are the chosen one, that you are the privileged one to receive the vineyard of the Lord from the unfaithful ones. Let us be always faithful. Let us always have that faithfulness towards our brothers and sisters, towards God. Amen. Let us all stand for the creed. Let us all together say, I believe in one God, Father